What's going on, everybody? It is Josh with Old School Cards, and we're back for another podcast, episode 16. We're getting ready to talk some cards. We're getting ready for the Four Nations face off as hockey's wrapping up, getting ready for that. So let's get right into our show lineup for today. We got some new stuff to cover. Hopefully, you guys enjoy it. I enjoyed making this content. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share so others can enjoy it too. First off, we're starting off with our market thoughts portion of the show. Today we're talking PSA and some things going on in that world. Second, 600 goal history. Our featured NHL 600 goal scorer is none other than Brendan Shanahan. Third, we're talking blue liner of the week. Our top two blue liners for the past week. Fourth, we're talking the top forward line of the week. The best line of the week. So our three forwards. That's new to the show. Fifth, a segment I like to call Poke Check, which will be featuring the best goalie for the last week. Sixth, we're moving into our milestone marker, and we're talking about Ovechkin again because he did reach an interesting milestone this week. And seventh, we're going to follow up the milestone marker of Ovechkin, and we're going to keep tabs on his chase for the Wayne Gretzky record in our Chasing Greatness portion of the show. And finally, we're going to wrap up the show with our personal pickups portion of the week. Got some cool stuff to show you guys this week. Hopefully, you guys enjoy them as much as I do. We're getting ready. Let's go. Let's get right into our first portion of the show and our market thoughts where we're talking PSA. All right. So, the first portion of the show, we're talking PSA, we're talking market thoughts. I wanted to start this show off by just going a little bit into what's some stuff going on with PSA right now. One of the things that just recently happened, everybody's talking about, is how PSA quietly changed their grading standard and didn't tell anybody. Which, this seems a little bit odd. It seems very odd to me because PSA is the industry leader in sports card grading and memorabilia grading. And they just changed their standards and don't announce it. They just kind of slide it under the radar. I don't really like that. And it really caused me to... Sorry, shifting. It really caused me to think this week long and hard about my PSA membership. And ultimately I decided I don't like the direction the company is going. I don't like the way they conduct business. And for personal reasons also, and I'll talk about them in a minute, I decided to cancel my PSA Members Club membership. And it'll still be good until it expires. It should renew in June. But this is the first time I really reflected on it, and I don't want to be a part of what they're doing. It just kind of feels like slimy business to me, and I don't appreciate it. I don't appreciate how they just do whatever and kind of take advantage of the customers and the people in the hobby. And I'm not a flipper, I'm a collector, so for me, it's not a risk that I'm willing to take, and not really investable for me. And I've decided to come up with some different ways to do things when it comes to my cards and grading. And I just could not justify continuing to give money to them with the way things are going. I've talked at length a few times about the inconsistency of their subjective grading model. And recently, they indicated that they're going to be more strict with their grading standards. And moving forward, it's going to be even tougher to get PSA 10s, which also in turn may devalue some people's PSA 10s based on what their standards have changed to. Now, like I said, I canceled my membership this week. It's something that's a foregone conclusion, and some of the factors outside of what PSA is doing. I mean, PSA was the major motivator in me canceling my subscription, but here's how I was thinking about it. I don't really like to flip cards. I do send cards in to get graded, but I collect PSA 9s anyway. I'm not a PSA 10 collector. So pretty much anything I got back that was a 10, I would sell to help fund my collection. But sometimes that means I send in 10 of the same card. And then I end up with a handful of 9s, maybe 6 9s or 7, and 1 or 2 10s that I can move. But for me, I've just really decided that PSA 9s, they're not really that unaffordable in price. And it's probably cheaper for me to just find a card I want and buy it already graded. Let somebody else go through the hassle of trying to find the grades and do those things. So for me, not only am I not vibing with their business model and their business practice, I'm a people person. I made a career out of dealing with people. And for almost 20 years, I was a police officer. And I can tell you this. A lot of people told me, oh, you're too nice to be a police officer. But I can also tell you, by the way I conducted myself professionally, even with those individuals who I was taking to jail because they were suspected of committing a crime, there were many times when I would be booking that person into jail and they would tell me, thank you for treating them decently. Thank you for treating me like a human and not being judgmental. It wasn't my place to be judgmental. I had a job to do, so I did my job. I don't agree with the ethics and the morals that is shaping up in that PSA world. And the only way I can combat that is by not putting my money into it. Now, like I said, I still collect PSA 9s, but is it cheaper for me to spend $10, $15, $20 on a PSA 9 card than sending in a 20 card submission at $20 a card and then having to pay that? And yes, very much so, it's cheaper. I don't want to give PSA any of my business, so I would rather buy somebody who already paid money for that. I'd rather buy the card and give my money to the person who was holding that card. And I would rather my money change hands with those people, because a lot of times those guys are the dealers or the sellers or so on and so forth. The other thing that's interesting about this whole grading situation is, if you look at it in a different perspective, someone said this week or this last couple weeks that they think that technology grading, so objective grading, is the future in cards. Right now, the card collecting community in sports cards is not really about it. But Jeremy Lee, who is invested with tag grading, had mentioned that in the TCG community, people are really drawing towards the objective grading of tag and away from subjective grading. And I don't know if it was in that conversation or another conversation, someone had mentioned that in order for us to go objective rather than subjective and effectively not manipulate the market, but change the landscape of the market, what would end up happening is initially the collecting community or sports cards would take a hit because there is a ton of money that people who are in the card community that gets exchanged, that this money exchanges hands a ton, because what happens is you have people who seek out raw cards for grading so they can flip them. You have people who seek out other company graded cards, BGS, SGC, CGC, in high grades. They crack those slabs, then submit them to PSA, hoping that they get a better grade or a high grade, which increases value. Then you also have the people who submit to PSA who, because it's subjective grading, the cards go off, they come back, oh, I don't like that this got a 7, I think it should have been a higher grade. They crack it, they resubmit it, and maybe it does come back a 9 or a higher grade, a 10, right? A lot of people submit cards off, they come back a 9, they crack them, they resubmit them, they come back a 10. That's a lot of money that's being exchanged, but it's false. It's not fraudulent, but it's false inflation into the cards because they're spending money on the same card. They're not spending new money. They're spending more money. And if we were going to go away from subjective grading and go to objective grading, a lot of that would cease to exist because Tag already has technology that if I submit a card to Tag, it comes back a Tag 9. Because the card is graded by a computer, the computer essentially takes the card like it's a fingerprint. And if I were to crack that slab, send that card back to Tag, I will get the same grade with a report saying that this card was already graded. The computer recognized the card, and therefore it gets the grade that it gets, which I'm good with. I'm totally okay with that. I think if we really want to grow, we have to trim the fat. And we are not in a position right now where we can grow the hobby when I can take... We're not in a position right now to grow this hobby where I can take the same card and regrade it and regrade it and regrade it. That's not growing the hobby. That's manipulating the market and trying to get more value out of the same thing. We're not generating new growth. So it's false growth anyway. But that's my decision. I hope that you guys can understand that. I'm sure that I'm not the only one who feels this way. I know of a lot of people who canceled their PSA memberships a year ago when they raised their membership price on everybody. But the mere fact that, PSA has their own podcast. It's called the PSA Pod. And they didn't announce grading changes, nothing. They just tried to slip it under people's nose. And there's a lot of people who are upset right now because they're submitting cards thinking that PSA was grading a certain way, and they had changed their grading standard without notifying any of the customers. The only way you get notified is when you get your cards back. And I'm starting to see a lot of content where people are very disappointed in their PSA returns, and they're already coming back probably with different grade results than they were expecting, and it has a lot to do with the fact that they changed their standards. So I'm much more content to shop around for the 9 or even an 8 or lower grade depending on the card, as opposed to just sending a bunch in and getting them graded and seeing what they get. So I've already decided the cards that I currently own that are not graded, that I want to get graded, they're not getting graded with PSA. They're either going to go to SGC or they're going to go to tag when the time comes. If I decide to grade them, because it might be just as easy for me to turn around and purchase the card in the grade that I want already than submitting something for a grade when I can just keep what I have raw. So that's the first portion of the show, guys. I hope that you enjoyed it. I want to know your thoughts on it. Go ahead and email me, oldschoolcards24. So it's OLDSCHOOLCARDS, the numbers 2424 at gmail.com. Let me know your thoughts on the grade process. What's going on with PSA? What do you think about it? Do you think it's a good thing for them to be conducting business the way that they do? Or are you going to withhold your money like I am and not give it to them? I want to know your thoughts. Reach out to me. Let me know. I look forward to hearing from you guys. And we're going to move right into the next portion of the show. And this is where the show really gets fun. The first part, market thoughts. It's a little bit kind of news related, and it's just kind of a real world perspective that I like to give. And just remember, it's my opinion. I'm entitled to my opinion. You may not agree with me, and that's okay. We don't have to agree. That's the beauty of it. And if you don't agree, I still want to hear from you, because maybe your opinion will make sense to me. At least I can understand where you're coming from. But I can't if you don't reach out, you don't let me know. The rest of the show is the fun part of the show. We're talking hockey cards, we're talking NHL stats, NHL players. That's where it gets a lot of fun. So come join me on the other side of this, and let's get into the fun part of the show. All right, we're getting right into point number 2 of our show lineup, 600 goal scorer history. This week we're talking Brendan Shanahan. On October 5th, 2006, Brendan Shanahan scored 2 goals, which brought him to career number 600. Brendan Shanahan is a 1987 second overall pick of the New Jersey Devils. The story behind his 600th goal is pretty legendary. It was the opening game of the season, his first game with the New York Rangers. Also happened to be Jaromir Jagr, another 600 goal scorer, his first game as the captain of the New York Rangers, taking over for Mark Messier. And Jagr scores a goal in that game. Brendan Shanahan scores 2 goals in that game to get him to the 600 goal mark. And it was his debut, Jagr's first game as captain. And guess what? The New York Rangers won the game at Madison Square Garden 5-2 over the Washington Capitals. Now, when Brendan Shanahan scored his 600th goal, he was the 15th player in NHL history to reach the milestone at the time. Let's talk a little bit about Brendan Shanahan. He had it seems like he had a quiet career, but he played 21 years in the NHL, I believe, for 5 different hockey teams. He played 1,524 games. He had 656 goals with 698 assists, giving him a total of 1,354 points in his career. And sorry about that, guys. My dog was going crazy, so I had to let him out. Brendan Shanahan, 1,354 career points, giving him a career plus minus of plus 151. Shanahan's a 3-time Stanley Cup champion, and he currently sits 14th all-time in goals, 28th all-time in points. He scored 30 goals 12 times, 40 goals 6 times, and 50 goals 2 times in his career. His best season was a 52-goal, 50-assist season for 102 points, and it was the 1993-94 season with the St. Louis Blues. And Brendan Shanahan was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2013 after announcing his retirement in the year 2009. So he played a little bit longer after scoring. He played 3 more seasons after scoring his 600th goal, and that's our 600 goal history for this week, episode 16. Brendan Shanahan. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll move right into the next portion of our show. So now we're on to the third segment of the show. It's the Blue Liner of the Week segment. It's one of my favorite parts of the podcast. That's why I decided to start incorporating a top line and a goaltender. But we're going to keep it broke down into segments. So segment number 3 is Blue Liner of the Week. We have our top 2 blue liners for the previous week, February 2nd through February 8th, 2025. And number 1 is the guy that many people consider the best defenseman in hockey, and he's been eluding our list until this week, Cale Makar of the Colorado Avalanche. This week he played in 4 games, scoring 3 goals, 3 assists for a total of 6 points. He had 1 hit, 5 block shots, and a plus minus of +3, while averaging 28 minutes and 20 seconds time on ice. Cale Makar is a 2017 first-round pick, 4th overall by the Colorado Avalanche. So he had a pretty good week. 3 goals, 3 assists for 6 points. That's really good. Cale Makar is a 2019-2020 Upper Deck Series 2, card number 493. His PSA 10 average sale over the last 90 days, $463. Little pricey, but not too pricey, because 62 people or 62 of his cards have been purchased over the last 90 days, with the last sale coming on February 8th, 2025 for $507. So that's $44 over the average sale price of the last 90 days. That card, 62.4% gem rate. He has 4,621 cards total graded with PSA, with 2,884 of those cards PSA 10s and 1,470 of those cards PSA 9s. So Cale Makar showed up and showed out in a big way in this last week prior to the Four Nations face-off tournament, that long NHL break that they have coming up here all the way till February 22nd, I believe. And yeah, he didn't just do it all on the assist side. He put some pucks in the net. So 3 goals, 3 assists, 6 points. He's our number 1 blue liner of the week. Our second blue liner of the week this week, somebody who's new to the list altogether, but he also came up with the Colorado Avalanche, Bowen Byram. In 3 games this week, he had 2 goals, 3 assists for 5 points. He was credited with 6 hits, 3 block shots, and a +1 rating while on the ice. Bowen Byram is currently a Buffalo Sabre, and he was drafted in 2019 first round 4th overall pick by the Colorado Avalanche. But if you remember, he was traded away a couple years ago. And he averaged 22 minutes and 26 seconds time on ice this week. Let's look at his card. Bowen Byram's rookie card can be found in the 2020-2021 Upper Deck Series 1, card number 205. His PSA 10 average value over the last 90 days is $27.67, and he's had 9 cards sold in the last 90 days. Last sale coming on February 3rd, 2025 for $34.99, so also a little bit more than the average for 90 days. He has 1,422 cards graded with PSA, with 573 of those being PSA 10s and 680 of those being PSA 9s for a gem rate of 40.3%. So Bowen Byram, this is the first case where I actually saw there are more PSA 9s of his card than there are PSA 10s. And his gem rate is low, but he doesn't have near the volume that Cale Makar has. But he also did have a good week. Former first round pick, 4th overall, same as Cale Makar, just in 2 different drafts a couple years apart. So it's kind of cool. They're both drafted by Colorado, except for only one still plays for Colorado. The other one's in Buffalo, and everybody knows the Sabres, although they're a young and talented roster, they have not played very well this season, being one of the worst teams in the NHL. Now we get to move into the new segment on the Old School Cards podcast, the best line of the week, where we look at the top 3 forwards in the NHL. And our first one is a guy I personally collect. He's number 1 for the week. And it's Matthew Tkachuk of the Florida Panthers. He is a 2016 first round pick, 6th overall by the Calgary Flames. If you remember, a couple years ago, he was traded to Florida. Then he won a cup in Florida. This week, 5 goals, 4 assists, 9 points, plus 3 on 23 shots. So he had a very good week, very productive. Way to start off our new segment in our show of Best Line of the Week. Matthew Tkachuk is a 2016-2017 Upper Deck Series 1, card number 231. His PSA 10 averages over the last 90 days $103. He's had 45 sales over the last 90 days. Last sale being on February 7th, 2025 for $94.26. So just under the average, which is good. He has 2,383 cards graded with PSA. 1,459 of those cards are PSA 10s. 782 of those cards are PSA 9s. And it gives Mr. Tkachuk 61.2% on the gem rate. So his gem rate's pretty decent. I love watching him play. He's a very good structure guy, but he can be very productive too. Obviously, he's the top scoring forward for the last week going into the Four Nations tournament. And number 2 on our list is a teammate of Matthew Tkachuk. It's Alexander Barkov, the captain of the Florida Panthers. He is a 2013 first round pick, 2nd overall from the Florida Panthers. This week, he scored 2 goals, 6 assists for 8 points. He had a +2 rating on the ice, and he only took 8 shots. So he had a 25% goal rate on his shots. His rookie card can be found in 2013-2014 Upper Deck Series 2, card number 470. So he is a Series 2 guy, number 2 overall pick from the 2013 draft. His PSA 10, a little more pricey over the last 90 days, $173, but only 5 sales in the last 90 days. So his value is higher, but there's less transactions. His last sale came on February 6, 2025 for $143, so $30 below the average. He has 572 cards graded with PSA. 376 of those cards are PSA 10s, and 158 of those cards are PSA 9s. So Mr. Barkov has a gem rate of 65.7% with PSA, which is pretty good. That's about on the high average of what you see. I don't think I've seen anybody in the 70% range, but 65, 66% is pretty darn good when you're looking for PSA 10s. So our top two guys, Florida Panthers, no coincidence that they're getting it done. They're, I think, at the top of their division in the standings, so they're playing really good. But a forward line has three guys. So this week, our third forward, number third, that is horrible grammar. Number third. Now, coming in at number 3 on the list is none other than the Colorado Avalanche's Nathan MacKinnon. I'm so glad this first week we got to get one of the big superstars on that forward line, not to mention Cale Makar in the blue liner of the week. And so we get Nathan MacKinnon coming in at number 3, and we'll give you his stats here in just a second. So our number 3, Nathan MacKinnon, Colorado Avalanche. He's a 2013 number 1 overall pick with the Colorado Avalanche. He also had 2 goals, 6 assists for 8 points, but a +3 rating on 18 shots. So MacKinnon had 8-point week. He had 18 shots. He ends up +3. He's a 2013-2014 Upper Deck Series 1, card number 238. So he's the number 1 overall pick, and they put him in Series 1. They didn't put him off into Series 2. His card is quite pricey. PSA 10, 90-day average, $559. And it's not a card that nobody's buying. 45 sales in the last 90 days. Last sale being on February 1st, 2025 for a whopping $633. So that's almost $100 above his average. He has 3,272 cards graded at PSA. 1,751 of those are PSA 10s. 1,133 of those cards are PSA 9s. And Mr. MacKinnon has a gem rate of 53.5%. So we've had an Avs player on defense. We have an Avs player on the forward line. And we're moving into another news segment that I like to call Poke Check. That's the name that I gave the segment of the show where we're going to showcase the top goalie for the last week from February 2nd to February 8th. So our number 1 netminder moving into the Four Nations tournament is another Avs player. So leading off, you would have thought, oh, Connor Hellebuck. Oh, somebody, who are some of our John Gibson, Hellebuck, some of these big name goalies, or Fleury, he's my favorite goalie right now. But no, it's another Colorado Avalanche player, and it's the goalie Mackenzie Blackwood. Now, funny story about Mackenzie Blackwood is I had him on my fantasy team. I believe I dropped him on February 1st, and then on February 2nd, he had a shutout, or February 3rd, he had a shutout, and he just proceeded to have maybe the best week of his goaltending life, where he went 3-1 with a 2.02 goals against average and a .927 save percentage with 1 shutout. So I dropped him off my fantasy league, and I picked up Stolars from Toronto because I knew he was coming off of the injured list, and he proceeded to just have a great week. 3 wins to 1 loss with basically a 2 goal against average. It's crazy. Mackenzie Blackwood, 2015 second round pick, 42nd overall, by the New Jersey Devils, and I actually really like his Young Guns card. It's pretty cool. You'll see it here on the screen with the different colors on the side. I don't know, it just really appeals to me. I thought it was a really cool card. His Young Guns card, speaking of the Young Guns card, his rookie card can be found in 2018-19 Upper Deck Series 1. It's card number 210. And he's a pretty affordable goalie. PSA 10 90-day average, $55.71. 13 sales over the last 90 days. Last sale being on February 6, 2025. For well under the average amount at $36.38. Probably because Blackwood was not having the season that I think a lot of people hoped he would have. But he had the week that I think everybody was hoping he would have that kind of a season. So he does have 448 cards graded with PSA. 324 of those are PSA 10s, while 112 of those cards are PSA 9s. And he does have a 72.3% gem rate. So there's one of our cards that we get to talk about that has an over 70% gem rate, which is really good. I'm glad he had a great week. I'm not so happy that I dropped him off my fantasy team, but maybe he'll come back down to earth. We'll never know. And, you know, moving in past the Four Nations tournament, I think he's playing for Team Canada in that tournament. So moving past that, we'll see what he does in the last 25 or 30 games of the season. And surely the Avalanche are going to be in the playoffs, so he should get some run there, maybe an uptick in his cards. But that ends our first poke check portion of the Old School Cards podcast, and now we're going to move into the next portion of our podcast. So here we are moving into the milestone marker portion of the Old School Cards podcast, and we get to talk Alex Ovechkin. I'm really excited. He's going to be our subject matter for the next two segments, because following this is the Chasing Greatness portion. But I don't know why I say portion so much. It kind of bothers me. Hopefully it doesn't bother you. But this week, Mr. Ovechkin, the Great Eight, did achieve another milestone. It happened on February 9th, 2025. Alex Ovechkin passed Phil Esposito for 11th place all-time in the points category. Esposito was sitting at 1,590, and going into February 9th, he was tied with Phil Esposito. But Alex Ovechkin had a 3-assist night on February 9th. And he now sits at 1,593 points and all by himself 11th all-time in points. So let's look at some of Ovechkin's career numbers. 1,465 total games. He's currently at 879 goals, 714 assists, 1,593 points. Good enough for 11th all-time. He's less than 50 points behind 10th place, and he's a plus 63 in his career. Now, if we look back, he was the number 1 overall pick in the 2004 draft by the Washington Capitals. And some of his hardware includes an Art Ross trophy, the Calder trophy, Conn Smythe trophy, 3-time Hart trophy winners, 9-time Rocket Richard trophy winner, a 3-time Lindsay Award winner, and a 1-time Stanley Cup champion. And I thought it would be fun to look at his cards, the way they're trending with the way he's chasing Gretzky's goal record. And I can tell you, it's pretty crazy, because I have some photos of prior to the season starting, and his PSA 10 value has gone up by $2,000 almost since the beginning of the season. Of course, he's an 05-06 Upper Deck Series 2, card number 443. His PSA 10 90-day average, $5,144. That's crazy. And 20 of those cards have sold in the last 90 days. So it's not just a one-off. Last sale came on February 6, 2025 for $5,002, so about $140 off of what the average is. He has 3,870 cards graded with PSA. 1,306 of those are PSA 10s. 1,568 of those are PSA 9s. And his gem rate is it's a miserable 33.7%. So not only is he one of the greatest, he's one of the greatest players of all time. He's going to be the greatest goal scorer of all time. He's going to be top 10 in points all time. And his rookie card has a very low gem rate. Here's another example where PSA 9s outnumber PSA 10s, and we have a very large sample size because what did I say? Almost 4,000 of his Young Guns cards are graded just with PSA. And mind you, he came into the league at a time where a lot of people were grading with Beckett. And I didn't even look up the numbers on Beckett, but I just looked up the PSAs. But now we get to keep talking about Alex Ovechkin and going to the next segment of the Old School Cards podcast, and that's the Chasing Greatness segment, where we're watching Ovi and watching what he's doing. And I just said that on February 9th he had 3 assists, but that was for the milestone marker portion of the show. What did he do goal-wise this week? We're about to find out. So this week, Ovechkin made some headway on the great one. He had 2 goals this week. Last goal came on February 6th, 2028, or 2025. We're not in 2028 yet. Against the Philadelphia Flyers. He now has 879 goals in his career, and he is only 15 behind Wayne Gretzky. So he needed to pick up the goal scoring pace. The last 2 weeks, he scored 2 goals in each week. So 4 goals over the last 2 weeks. He actually scored those 4 goals in consecutive games. He had 1 goal each game across 4 games. So he's moving up the food chain there. He's getting to that point where he's going to be in striking distance soon. I can only imagine that his card's going to go, just keep ticking up, and probably going to spike when he does break the record. So it's going to be interesting where they settle at once he becomes the greatest goal scorer of all time. I hope you guys are watching history being made. It's a lot of fun to see what's going on in the NHL, but it's so much fun when you're watching somebody do something that you may never see again. Quite frankly, it's just going to be hard to do. I mean, he's a prolific goal scorer. He's a generational player. I mean, he came in with Crosby, and Crosby's great in his own right, but Crosby is no goal scorer like Alex Ovechkin. So it's just a ton of fun to watch. We're seeing him not really fold under the pressure. He's actually performing better the closer he gets to the record. So it should be fun to watch moving into the last portion of the season. He's going to have that time to get some rest. Hopefully he comes out fresh and just hits it going strong. It should be a lot of fun to watch the last 20 games or so of the season for them, because he could theoretically get there this year, which I didn't think was going to be possible, but he's going to need some help. It's going to have to he's going to have to do very, very well goal-wise if he wants to get there this year, but nonetheless, he's going to be super close going into next season. So that's it for our Chasing Greatness segment of Old School Cards. Now we're going to move into the next segment of the Old School Cards podcast. Stay with us. So now we're moving into the very last segment before we close out the show. I'm going to show you some cards I picked up and the prices that I paid for them off of eBay. I just put them up there so you guys can see what I'm talking about. I'm getting some really cool cards for under $20. A lot of Gretzky, some more Kachuk. both Matt and Brady. There's a little thing going on with the Brady Tkachuk thing that I can't talk about right now, but I will talk about it soon enough. But the big card I wanted to show you guys, this one has a little bit of an interesting story too. He is another 600 goal scorer that I get to check off the list, and I don't get to actually physically show you guys the card this week because the card is in my P.O. box, and when I went to get it today prior to filming the podcast, the highway was completely blocked off with law enforcement and everything else, and it was that way for several hours because apparently on the highway between my house and the post office, a tanker truck flipped off the road and spilled fuel or something everywhere. So they literally spent all day. If you guys have a Great Pyrenees, you know the struggle is real. They are a talking breed, right as I say that. So literally, they're a big time vocal talking breed. He likes to bark at anything, everything. You talk to him, he'll bark at you. That's pretty much how it goes. So sorry about that. We're in the personal pickups portion of the show, and 600 goal scorer, and it's none other than Brendan Shanahan. I was saying that the card is in my P.O. box. It was delivered. I went to go pick it up today. I don't physically have it because the highway was shut down with the tanker truck spilled over. But nonetheless, I know it's there. I'll pick it up tomorrow. And I have pictures off of the PSA website to show you. Beautiful card, PSA 8. And I purchased this card on February 2nd. So last week came yesterday or the day before, but I paid $19.99 from it's a site off of eBay. I'm trying to think. The four sharp corners. That's who it was. I'm sorry, I was drawing a blank. I bought it from 4 Sharp Corners eBay store. They usually have really good prices on their cards. You can't beat it, guys. This guy's a 600 goal scorer. We talked about him earlier in the podcast, and I got a collector's grade because it's a 1980s card and a PSA 8 for $19.99 plus $5 shipped, something like that. So it's crazy the amount of good deals you can get on some of these all-time great hockey players. So that's the big one I wanted to show you guys today. That's a wrap for episode 16 of the Old School Cards podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed the content as much as I enjoyed making it. Once again, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. I want to share this with everybody. I want other people to enjoy it too. And please, if you have information, if you have something you want to talk about, I don't have to talk about it on my podcast, guys. Reach out to me. Email me, oldschoolcards24@gmail.com. I love talking cards. We can just talk cards. Doesn't have to be anything for the show, anything like that. So, look forward to hearing from you guys. Stay safe this week. I got a lot going on with... I'm a high school track and baseball coach, so the spring is a little crazy. I have a scrimmage tomorrow where our baseball team is 2-0 in scrimmages so far this year. We're getting ready for tournament play in the state of Texas. So there's a lot on my plate, but I still find the time to sit down and grind this out because I love it. And I'm going to have to get creative next week because the Four Nations tournament is starting. So this is going to be our last standard format until the end of February because NHL games don't start back up until the 22nd, I believe. 22nd, 23rd, something like that of February. So until next time, guys, keep collecting what you love, and I'll talk to you soon. Josh is checking out here with the Old School Cards podcast. Number 16, it's a wrap.